While I was in labor with our daughter, my husband Hank emptied our joint savings account. $127,000 gone in a single transfer. What he didn't know was that my real wealth was safely tucked away in accounts he never knew existed. The family fortune my grandmother left me would change everything. The nurse placed my newborn daughter in my arms, her tiny fingers wrapped around my index finger as tears of joy streamed down my face. This perfect moment, one I'd dreamed about for years, was interrupted by my phone buzzing repeatedly on the hospital nightstand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I ignored it, focusing instead on counting her fingers and toes, marveling at how something so small could make me feel so complete. "Mrs. Rivera, where's your husband?" the nurse asked, glancing around the empty room. "Shouldn't he be here by now?" "He's on his way," I lied, the words bitter in my mouth. Hank had been unreachable for the past 6 hours. My water broke early that morning, and despite my repeated calls and texts, he hadn't answered. My neighbor Agnes had driven me to the hospital instead, staying until she had to leave for her afternoon shift. After Agnes left, I was truly alone. Well, not entirely. I had my daughter Freya, named after my grandmother, the woman who had taught me that independence was the greatest gift I could give myself. When the nurses finally took Freya to the nursery for her first checkups, I reached for my phone, expecting frantic missed calls from Hank with excuses about traffic or meetings he couldn't escape. Instead, I found an automated email from our bank. Confirmation of wire transfer, $127,000 from joint savings account ending in Manwisadonade to 2. My fingers trembled as I logged into our banking app. The account we'd built together over 3 years of marriage, the account meant for emergencies, for Freya's education, for our future, had been drained to just $42.17. Below the transfer was a smaller withdrawal of $4,800 from our checking account, leaving barely enough to cover next month's mortgage payment. The room seemed to spin around me. Labor had been exhausting, but this was something else entirely. My chest tightened as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was this a mistake? A banking error? Had our accounts been hacked? I called Hank again. Straight to voicemail. Then, I called the bank. The transfer had been authorized in person, with proper ID and password verification. The recipient account belonged to Carlson Investments LLC, an entity I'd never heard of. "Would you like to report this as fraud, Mrs. Wilson?" the bank representative asked. I hesitated, my new maternal instincts already calculating risks and consequences. "Not yet," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need to speak with my husband first." After hanging up, I opened my photos and found one taken just 3 weeks ago, Hank and me at our baby shower, his arm around my swollen belly, both of us smiling. Had he been planning this even then? While our friends and family celebrated, the new life we'd created together, had he been plotting to leave? Hank and I had met 4 years ago at a charity fundraiser for children's literacy. I was 32, newly relocated to Portland after escaping a disastrous relationship with Joe, who had systematically drained my accounts and maxed out credit cards in my name. After Joe, I'd made a promise to myself. Never again would I be financially vulnerable to a man. Which is why, when I married Hank, I kept my family's wealth a secret. The Wilson fortune, passed down through 3 generations of strong, savvy women, remained hidden in trusts and investment accounts he knew nothing about. On paper, I was Lucia Wilson, marketing executive with a modest salary. The millions in diversified assets, real estate, and business holdings remained invisible, protected by a web of legal structures my grandmother had designed and my mother had maintained before passing them to me. "Are you sure about this?" my mother had asked before my wedding. Starting a marriage with such a significant secret? "It's not forever," I'd assured her. "Just until I'm certain." As it turned out, I'd never become certain enough to tell him. I scrolled through my phone to find another email, this one from a month ago. An invitation to the quarterly meeting with my financial advisor. The statement summary showed my personal wealth at just over $24 million. I'd attended the meeting over Zoom, late at night while Hank was traveling for work, strategically planning how to structure my assets once the baby arrived. Now, as I stared at the stark contrast between our emptied joint account and my well-managed fortune, a strange calm settled over me, the same calm I'd felt after discovering Joe's betrayal, when I realized that my grandmother's financial lessons had saved me from complete disaster. My door opened, and for a moment I thought it might be Hank, finally arriving with some implausible explanation. Instead, Agnes peeked in, having returned after her shift ended. "How are you doing, sweetheart?" she asked, her eyes immediately registering my distress. "What's happened? Is the baby okay?" "Freya is perfect," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "But Hank, he's taken everything from our accounts." Agnes rushed to my side, pulling me into an awkward hug around the hospital. "Bed rails? Oh, Lucia. Men like that deserve—" "It's okay," I interrupted, straightening my shoulders. "He didn't get everything. Not even close." Agnes looked confused. We'd been neighbors for 3 years, and she knew me as a successful, but certainly not wealthy, marketing executive. She'd seen our modest home, my practical car, heard me discuss budgeting and saving for the baby. "There's something I need to tell you," I said, reaching for my phone again. "But first I need to make a call." The number I dialed wasn't in my contacts. I knew it by heart. It had been my lifeline since I was 21, and had first taken control of my inheritance. "Freya Wilson and Associates," answered a crisp, professional voice. "Amy, it's Lucia," I said. "I need to invoke Protocol 7. There was a brief pause. Protocol 7 was our code for urgent asset protection, a comprehensive lockdown of all accounts, properties, and investments under my name. "Understood," Amy replied, her tone shifting to business mode. "Location?" "Portland Memorial, maternity ward," I said. "And Amy?" "I had the baby, a girl." "Congratulations," she said, warmth momentarily breaking through her professional demeanor. "Name?" "Freya," I replied, a small smile forming despite everything. "After grandmother." "Perfect. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't sign anything. Until I arrive." As I ended the call, Agnes stared at me. "Lucia, what's going on? Who's Amy?" I took a deep breath, ready to share the truth with someone for the first time in years. "Amy is my family's attorney. And as for what's going on," I gestured to my phone where the bank notification still showed the drained account. "Hank thought he was ruining me financially, on what should have been the happiest day of our lives. But what he doesn't know is that I'm worth more than he could imagine. And now, he's about to learn exactly who he tried to steal from." The machines. Monitoring my vitals beeped steadily as I settled back against the pillows, my mind already calculating the steps ahead. I wasn't frightened. I wasn't even particularly angry. Instead, I felt an odd sense of clarity, as if the final piece of a puzzle had fallen into place. "I want to see my daughter," I told Agnes. "And then I need you to do me a favor." Agnes returned with Freya nestled in a hospital-issued blanket, her tiny face peaceful in sleep. As I cradled my daughter, the weight of her in my arms centered me, transforming the chaos of the past hour into crystalline focus. "She's beautiful," Agnes whispered, perching on the edge of the hospital bed. "What favor do you need?" I handed her my phone. "Take a photo of us, please. Just Freya and me." Agnes looked confused but complied, capturing the moment, me holding my newborn daughter, my face composed despite the betrayal I'd just discovered. I examined the image, then nodded. "Perfect. Now I need you to send this exact message to Hank." "She has your eyes. Where are you?" Agnes typed the message, her fingers hesitating over the send button, Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Are you sure you don't want to confront him about the money? Not yet, I replied, adjusting Freya's blanket. Let him think I don't know. The calm that had settled over me wasn't shock or denial. It was a peculiar clarity I'd experienced only once before, when I discovered Joe's betrayal 6 years ago and realized I'd need to rebuild my life from scratch. That time, I'd been devastated, spending weeks cycling through grief, rage, and humiliation. This time was different. I felt none of the panic that typically accompanies financial disaster. No racing heart, no shallow breathing, no spiraling thoughts about impending homelessness or bankruptcy. Instead, I felt something unexpected, a strange sense of confirmation, as if a suspicion I'd been harboring had finally been proven true. Aren't you upset? Agnes asked, watching me with concern. Of course, I said, tracing Freya's perfect eyebrows with my fingertip. But not surprised. Some part of me never fully trusted him, which is why I never told him about my family's money, why I insisted on keeping my inheritance separate, why I maintained my maiden name professionally. What I didn't say was how I'd noticed small indicators over the past year: Hank's increasing secrecy around his phone, unexplained absences, sudden interest in our financial accounts after previously leaving all money management to me. Nothing concrete enough to justify accusations, just enough to plant seeds of doubt. While Agnes sent the message to Hank, I opened my email and composed a message to my team at Wilson Creative, the boutique marketing firm I'd established after moving to Portland. A firm that appeared modestly successful from the outside, but was in reality just one small branch of Wilson Enterprises, the diversified holding company my grandmother had built from a single real estate investment in 1968, taking extended maternity leave effective immediately. Amy Lawford will contact each of you with transition details. Vernon will serve as interim. Creative Director, thank you for your understanding during this personal time. I pressed send, then drafted a second email to Vernon, my trusted second-in-command. V. Baby girl arrived healthy. Unexpected complications, not medical, require my full attention. Invoking contingency plan we discussed. Call Amy Lawford for details. Trust no communications from Hank. We'll explain everything soon. L. Vernon and I had worked together for nearly a decade. He'd followed me from New York after the Joe disaster, one of the few people who knew my full history and understood why I kept my wealth concealed. He would know exactly what to do. Message sent, Agnes reported, returning my phone. No response yet. I nodded, unsurprised. He'll answer eventually. Men like Hank can never resist the opportunity to lie. As I spoke, a soft knock at the door announced Amy's arrival. At 56, Amy Lawford carried herself with the quiet authority of someone who had helped manage one of the country's largest private fortunes for over 2 decades. In her tailored navy suit and practical pumps, she looked more like a corporate executive than the cutthroat legal mind my grandmother had handpicked right out of Harvard Law. Lucia, she said, her professional demeanor softening as she approached the bed. And this must be little Freya. I introduced Agnes, who seemed slightly overwhelmed by Amy's presence. Perhaps I should give you some privacy, Agnes suggested, reaching for her purse. Stay, I said, surprising myself with the request. I'd like you to hear this too. After Agnes settled back into her chair, Amy opened her leather portfolio and produced a tablet. Protocol 7 is active. All accounts are secured, properties locked down, and the trust administrators have been notified. Nothing can be accessed without biometric verification now. She paused. Want to tell me what happened? I handed her my phone, open to the banking app. Amy studied it silently, her expression darkening. The timing suggests premeditation, she observed. Making his move while you were in labor. Cowardly, Agnes muttered. But predictable, I replied. He knows I'm organized. He knew I'd notice immediately if I wasn't distracted by childbirth. Amy nodded, making notes on her tablet. We've frozen the transferred funds. Carlson Investments appears to be a recently formed LLC. Wyoming registration, minimal disclosure requirements. We're investigating the principals now, but I suspect we'll find Hank's name eventually. Don't freeze the funds, I said, surprising both women. Let him think he got away with it, for now. Amy raised an eyebrow. May I ask what you're planning? I looked down at Freya, still sleeping peacefully despite the adult concerns swirling around her. I'm thinking of grandmother's favorite strategy, AT. Small smile crossed Amy's face. The long game. Exactly. Hank believes he's dealing with a vulnerable new mother who's just lost her financial security. That perception gives us an advantage. Like grandmother, like granddaughter, Amy murmured. She would be proud. Agnes looked between us, confusion evident on her face. I don't understand. Shouldn't you be calling the police, freezing accounts, doing something? I am doing something, I explained. I'm giving him enough rope to hang. Himself. The hospital room fell silent except for Freya's soft breathing and the steady beep of monitors. I felt an unexpected sense of liberation. The decision to keep my wealth secret from Hank had always weighed on me. A necessary deception that contradicted my desire for an honest marriage. Now that deception had proven justified, the burden of secrecy lifted. What do you need from me? Agnes asked finally. When I'm discharged tomorrow, I'd like to stay with you for a few days. I need to appear vulnerable and distraught. Someone who's just discovered her husband's betrayal and has nowhere else to go. Agnes nodded immediately. Of course, my guest room is yours for as long as you need. Thank you. I turned to Amy. And I need a complete background investigation on Hank, deeper than what we did before the wedding. Every account, every contact, every communication we can legally access. I want to know who he really is. Amy made another note. Already initiated. We should have preliminary results by tomorrow afternoon. As they discussed logistics, my phone vibrated with a message from Hank. Sorry I missed it. Emergency with the Seattle account. She's beautiful. We'll be there first thing tomorrow. Love you both. I showed the message to Amy, who photographed it with her phone. Documented, she said. Time-stamped evidence of his location claim. I didn't respond to Hank's message. Instead, I settled back against the pillows, exhaustion from labor finally catching up with me. Get some rest, Amy advised, standing to leave. Tomorrow, we start building your case. As my eyes grew heavy, I found myself thinking not of Hank's betrayal, but of my grandmother Freya, how she'd rebuilt her life after my grandfather abandoned her with 2 young children and a mountain of hidden debt. How she'd transformed that crisis into an empire through sheer determination and strategic patience. The best revenge, she used to tell me, is watching from your tower as they drown in the moat they dug themselves. The morning light filtered through the hospital blinds. As I fed Freya, marveling at how naturally she took to nursing despite being just hours old. A light knock at the door announced the arrival of Dr. Winters for her morning rounds. How are we doing today? She asked, checking Freya's vitals before examining my stitches. Any excessive pain or bleeding? Nothing unexpected, I replied, wincing slightly as I shifted position. Dr. Winters nodded approvingly. Your recovery is proceeding well. I see here you're scheduled for discharge at noon. Is someone coming to take you home? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Hank. Stuck in Seattle traffic, flight delayed, might not make it for discharge. Can you ask Agnes to help? We'll meet you at home. Sorry, babe. I showed the message to Agnes, who had arrived early with toiletries and a loose dress for me to wear home. Unbelievable, she muttered. I texted back. Agnes will drive us. Where were you when I called yesterday? His response came quickly. In meetings all day. Phone died. Going crazy here trying to wrap things up. Can't wait to see you both. Each lie added another brick to the wall of evidence I was building. I imagined him somewhere far from Seattle, perhaps already spending the money he'd stolen, composing these messages with calculated precision. Agnes will be helping me, I told Dr. Winters, who made a note in my chart. And your husband? Business emergency, I said, the practiced explanation sliding easily from my lips. How many times had I made excuses for Hank's absences over the years? Dinner parties, holiday gatherings, even our own anniversary celebration last year, all missed because of unavoidable work commitments. After Dr. Winters left, a hospital social worker arrived with discharge papers and new parent information. As she reviewed the forms with me, she paused at the birth certificate application. "Father's information?" she asked. I provided Hank's details automatically, then hesitated. "Actually, could I take this form with me? I'd like my husband to fill out his portion." The social worker agreed, explaining I had up to 5 days to submit the completed birth certificate application. Another small strategic decision. I wasn't ready to legally connect Hank to Freya until I knew exactly what I was dealing with. As Agnes helped me pack the few items I'd brought to the hospital, I found myself recounting the day before, how ordinary it had started, how dramatically it had ended. I woke up around 5 with contractions, I told her, folding the soft receiving blankets the nurses had given us. Hank was already gone, supposedly for an early meeting before his flight to Seattle. I made myself breakfast, timed the contractions, and called him when they were 6 minutes apart. And he didn't answer, Agnes finished, her voice laden with disapproval. "Not the first call or the second or the fifth," I confirmed. "By then, my water had broken and I called you." What I didn't tell Agnes was how I'd felt in those moments, not just the physical pain of contractions, but the emotional ache of facing childbirth alone. Despite my financial independence and professional success, I had wanted a true partner in Hank. Someone to share the journey of parenthood, to hold my hand through the scary parts, to be the father I'd never really had. Myself, the irony wasn't lost on me. My own father had disappeared when I was 2, leaving my mother to raise me alone until she remarried when I was 10. My stepfather, Vernon Sr., had been kind but distant, more colleague than parent to my driven mother. He died when I was in college, leaving my mother comfortable but once again alone. The Wilson women seemed destined for self-reliance. "What if he comes home while we're at my place?" Agnes asked, interrupting my thoughts. "He won't," I said confidently. "Whatever story, he's concocted needs time to play out. He'll claim travel delays, maybe even stretch it to tomorrow." "How can you be so sure?" I zipped my small duffel bag, considering how to explain. When you've been lied to before, really systematically deceived, you develop a sense for the patterns. Joe, my ex-boyfriend, would create elaborate scenarios, designed to extract maximum sympathy while concealing his true activities. Hank is different in many ways, but the fundamental playbook is the same. Agnes nodded, though I could tell she didn't fully understand the calm certainty with which I predicted Hank's behavior. How could she? She hadn't experienced the meticulous betrayal I had endured with Joe, who had spent 2 years systematically draining my accounts while convincing me his financial emergencies were temporary setbacks in his fledgling investment. Career Joe, who had proposed with a ring bought using my own credit card. Joe, who had disappeared the day after I confronted him with bank statements showing he had stolen nearly $300,000 from me. The money hadn't mattered much. It was only a small fraction of my true wealth, which Joe never discovered thanks to my grandmother's strict compartmentalization of our family's assets. But the betrayal had shattered my trust, sending me fleeing from New York to Portland, where I reinvented myself as a moderately successful marketing executive, keeping my true financial status hidden from everyone I met, including, eventually, Hank. By 11:30, the discharge nurse arrived with a wheelchair. Hospital policy required me to be wheeled to the exit, though I felt physically capable of walking. Agnes had already installed the car seat in her Subaru, and as the nurse helped me into the passenger seat, I glanced back at the hospital entrance, half expecting to see Hank rushing toward us with flowers and apologies. The entrance remained empty. "He's not coming," Agnes said gently, starting the engine. "I know," I replied, adjusting Freya's blanket in her car seat. "And that's valuable information." The drive to Agnes's Victorian duplex in the Selwood neighborhood took 20 minutes. I spent the time on my phone, sending a carefully crafted email to Hank detailing our discharge and explaining that I would be staying with Agnes until you get home, since I didn't feel comfortable being alone so soon after giving birth. His response came as Agnes was helping me up her front steps. "Good idea, babe. Flight now scheduled for tomorrow a.m. We'll come straight to Agnes's. Need anything?" "Just you," I replied, a message calculated to maintain the illusion that I remained oblivious to his betrayal. Agnes had prepared her guest room with unexpected thoroughness. A bassinet borrowed from her daughter, a changing station, improvised from a dresser, even a nursing pillow and breast pump she'd acquired overnight. "My daughter Emma sent most of this over," she explained, helping me settle into the comfortable window seat that overlooked her garden. "She said to tell you solidarity from one single mom to another." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a single mom." Yet, my mind added silently. Agnes had the grace to look embarrassed. I might have explained the situation when I called to borrow the baby things. Before I could respond, my phone rang, Amy's name flashing on the screen. "I need to take this." I told Agnes, who nodded and slipped from the room, closing the door softly behind her. "We found something," Amy said without preamble. "Actually, several somethings. How soon can you talk privately?" I glanced at Freya, sleeping peacefully in her borrowed bassinet. "I have about an hour before she needs to feed again. What did you find?" "Not over the phone," Amy replied. "I'm 10 minutes from your location. Vernon is with me." When I ended the call, I sat very still, watching the gentle rise and fall of my daughter's chest. Whatever Amy and Vernon had discovered, their tone and urgency suggested it was worse than I had imagined. For the first time since seeing that bank notification, I felt a flicker of genuine anger. Not for the money. Money could be replaced. But for the timing, for making what should have been one of the most joyful days of my life into the beginning of yet another betrayal. "Your father has terrible timing," I whispered to Freya. "But he has no idea who he's dealing with." Amy arrived exactly 10 minutes later, Vernon following close behind carrying a sleek aluminum laptop case. They entered Agnes's guest room with the quiet efficiency of people accustomed to handling sensitive matters in private settings. Vernon, tall and meticulously groomed as always, broke protocol to give me a gentle hug before setting his case on the small writing desk. "She's beautiful, Lucia," he said, glancing at Freya. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely warmed by his presence. Vernon had been my rock through the aftermath of the Joe disaster, helping me rebuild not just my professional identity, but my confidence. He was the brother I never had, and one of the few people I trusted implicitly. Amy, always more formal, placed her tablet on the bed beside me. "We've compiled a preliminary report. It's concerning." "Show me everything," I said, straightening against the pillows. Vernon opened his laptop and connected it to a small portable projector, casting its display onto the cream-colored wall opposite the bed. Amy dimmed the lights and closed the blinds. "Let's start with the money trail," Amy began, tapping her tablet to advance the first slide. "The $127,000 from your joint savings went to Carlson Investments, LLC, which we now know is registered to a Carson Whitfield. That's Hank's middle and mother's maiden names." "Predictable," I murmured. "From there," Vernon continued, "the funds were immediately dispersed to 3 separate accounts." He pointed to a flowchart showing the money's movement. $42,000 went to pay off a credit card in the name of Melanie Hargrove. $38,000 was transferred to a down payment account at Northwest Realty, and the remaining $47,000 went to a checking account under the names Henry and Melanie Whitfield. Melanie Hargrove, I repeated, the name utterly unfamiliar to me. Who is she? Amy swiped to a new slide showing a woman's driver's license photo. Melanie Hargrove was strikingly attractive, early 30s, long auburn hair, the kind of polished beauty that comes from expensive maintenance. She's a pharmaceutical sales representative based in Seattle, Amy explained. According to social media, she's been divorced for approximately 18 months. No children. Vernon added, their connection appears to date back at least 11 months, based on cross-referenced location data from their respective social media accounts. They were at the same Seattle hotel during Hank's supposed business trips in June, September, and December of last year, and February and April of this year. I stared at the evidence, absorbing each detail with clinical detachment. 11 months. Nearly the entire duration of my pregnancy. While I was growing our child, Hank had been cultivating an entirely separate life. The Northwest Realty payment, I said, redirecting my focus to the financial trail. What property? Vernon clicked to a new slide showing a modern townhouse in Seattle's Belltown neighborhood. Two-bedroom condo, $950,000 list price. Down payment of $190,000 required. Hank's withdrawn approximately $152,000 from various accounts over the past 4 months, presumably saving for this purchase. The $38,000 was the remainder needed, I concluded. They're buying a place together. Closing date is next Thursday, Amy confirmed. Both names on the mortgage application. I nodded slowly, processing the information. The condo purchase explained why Hank had been so insistent that I handle our household finances alone over the past year. Not out of trust or delegation, as he'd claimed, but to conceal his systematic draining of his personal accounts. What? About the credit card debt? I asked. Amy brought up a new screen showing months of statements. Primarily luxury purchases. Designer clothing, jewelry, high-end restaurants. Weekend trips to Vancouver and San Francisco. The card was maxed out, at $42,000 with a 24% interest rate. He paid off her credit card before paying the mortgage down payment in full, Vernon observed. Interesting prioritization. Indeed it was. The pattern was becoming clear. Hank had been setting up his exit for months, carefully constructing a new life while maintaining the appearance of the devoted husband preparing for fatherhood. There's more, Amy said, her tone growing more serious. We found evidence suggesting this isn't his first time doing this. The next slides detailed a pattern that made my stomach clench. Before me, Hank, or Henry Whitfield, as he'd apparently been known then, had been briefly married to a woman named Rebecca Turner in Chicago. Their marriage had lasted 18 months and ended when Rebecca was 6 months pregnant. Court records showed she had filed for divorce citing financial fraud and abandonment. He left his pregnant wife? I whispered, instinctively glancing toward Freya, and took approximately $95,000 from their joint accounts. Vernon confirmed grimly. Sound familiar? The pattern continued. Before Rebecca, there had been Stephanie Oakes in Minneapolis, not married but engaged, also subjected to financial manipulation before Hank disappeared. 3 women in 7 years, each relationship overlapping with the next, each ending with a significant financial loss for the woman involved. This is his methodology, Amy explained. He targets financially stable women, preferably with assets or good income, establishes legitimacy through marriage or engagement, then creates a solid pretext for accessing joint funds before disappearing, with a significant sum. The pregnancy angle appears to be newer, perhaps an evolution of his strategy. It provides the perfect distraction, I said, the pieces fitting together with horrible clarity. A woman in late pregnancy or with a newborn is vulnerable, overwhelmed, less likely to immediately pursue legal action or contact authorities. Vernon nodded. Precisely. He's refined his approach over time. The final slides showed something unexpected. A marriage license application filed in King County, Washington, dated just 3 weeks ago. The names Henry Carson Whitfield and Melanie Ann Hargrove. He's marrying her? I asked, genuinely surprised. While still married to me? Bigamy would be the least of his legal problems at this point, Amy noted dryly. I sat back against the pillows, taking slow, measured breaths. The evidence before me told a clear story. Hank wasn't just a cheater or an opportunistic thief. He was a calculated predator with a documented pattern of behavior spanning nearly a decade. Have you traced the $4,800 from our checking account? I asked, remembering the smaller withdrawal. Vernon clicked to a new slide. Airline tickets, 2. First-class tickets to Bora Bora, departing next Friday, 1 day after the scheduled condo closing. A honeymoon, I said flatly. Presumably, Amy agreed. I studied each piece of evidence, each transaction, each pattern of deception. The completeness of Hank's betrayal should have been devastating, but instead, I felt an odd sense of professional admiration. The man had orchestrated an elaborate exit strategy, timed precisely to maximize his gain while minimizing his risk of consequences. Had I been anyone else, had I not been a Wilson woman, raised with my grandmother's paranoid approach to financial security, his plan would have worked perfectly. He thinks I'm financially ruined, I said slowly. Unable to pursue him legally because I need every resource for the baby. By the time I could recover enough to take action, he and Melanie would be established elsewhere, perhaps with new identities. That appears to be the strategy, Amy confirmed. I looked at Freya again, now stirring slightly in her bassinet, her tiny face scrunching in what would soon become hunger. Everything Hank had done, every lie, every manipulation, every stolen dollar seemed insignificant compared to what he was walking away from. The chance to know his daughter. What do you want to do? Vernon asked gently. I turned back to face them, decision already crystallizing. Everything he's done is documented? You have forensic evidence? Amy nodded. Chain of custody maintained, all legally obtained. Good, I said, my voice steadying with resolve. Because we're not just going to recover what he stole from me. We're going to make sure he never does this to another woman. As Freya began to fuss, signaling the end of our meeting, I outlined the beginnings of a plan. One that would require patience, precision, and the full resources of the Wilson fortune. We move in silence for now, I instructed. No contact with authorities yet. I want to understand the full scope of his operation before we act. Vernon packed up his equipment as Amy made notes on her tablet. And I need one more thing, I added as they prepared to leave. Find Rebecca Turner. I want to speak with her. Later that evening, after Agnes had gone to bed and Freya was sleeping soundly in her bassinet, I sat in the window seat with my grandmother's journal open on my lap. I hadn't read it in years, but the familiar looping handwriting provided comfort as I confronted the parallels between her life and mine. Freya Wilson Sr. had been 26 when my grandfather emptied their accounts and disappeared with his secretary, leaving her with 2 young children and a foreclosure notice on their modest home. It was 1968, a time when divorced women faced significant social and financial obstacles. Without marketable skills or family support, most would have crumbled under the weight of such abandonment. But grandmother Freya wasn't most women. When Roger left, I discovered an unexpected gift she'd written in her journal. Freedom from pretense. No longer did I need to play the supportive wife, subordinating my intelligence to preserve his fragile ego. His betrayal liberated me to become fully myself. Within 5 years of her abandonment, she had turned a single real estate investment, a rundown apartment building purchased with a loan secured against her wedding jewelry, into a small portfolio of profitable properties. By the time I was born, Freya Wilson Enterprises managed commercial real estate across 3 states. My mother, Elizabeth, had expanded the business into development and construction, tripling its value before her early death from breast cancer when I was 21. As the sole heir, I had inherited not just wealth, but a legacy of women who had turned betrayal into opportunity. I traced my finger over my grandmother's words. Men like Roger believe a woman's greatest asset is her beauty or her womb. They never suspect her mind. My own history with financial betrayal had begun 6 years ago with Joe. Fresh out of business school and eager to prove myself to my grandmother, I'd been an easy target for a handsome, charismatic entrepreneur whose investment schemes always needed just a little more capital. Joe had found my public professional profile, marketing executive with an MBA from a good school, attractive enough to pursue. What he never discovered was my true financial status. Following my grandmother's example, I'd always maintained a deliberate separation between my public professional identity and my private financial reality. When I caught Joe using my credit cards to fund a lavish lifestyle with another woman, I could have pressed charges. The evidence was clear. But legal action would have meant public exposure, potentially revealing the full extent of the Wilson fortune that 3 generations of women had worked to protect. Instead, I'd simply disappeared, moving across the country to Portland, changing my phone number and starting over. The money Joe stole amounted to less than 0.2% of my actual net worth, an acceptable cost for the valuable lesson it provided. A lesson I had obviously failed to fully internalize, given my current situation with Hank. I'd met Hank Wilson at a literacy fundraiser where my agency had donated marketing services. He was charming, intelligent, and seemingly transparent about his modest financial background. An operations manager for a regional manufacturing company, he made a comfortable living but nothing extraordinary. Our courtship had progressed naturally. Dinners, weekend trips, meeting friends. When he proposed after 14 months, I'd been cautious but hopeful. The prenuptial agreement I insisted upon had seemed to bother him only briefly before he signed, apparently accepting my explanation about wanting to protect my retirement accounts. What he didn't know was that the retirement accounts represented less than 5% of my actual assets. The rest remained carefully concealed within the labyrinthine structure of trusts, holding companies, and private investments my grandmother had designed and my mother had perfected. Our wedding had been small, just 40 guests at a pleasant, but not extravagant venue. Hank had seemed genuine in his vows, his eyes clear and earnest as he promised to stand beside me through whatever life brought our way. For a time, we were happy. Hank received a promotion, I expanded my agency, and when I discovered I was pregnant, he had seemed genuinely excited, immediately converting our home office into a nursery. In retrospect, I could identify the subtle shifts that should have alarmed me. The gradual withdrawal, the increasing business trips, the vague explanations for missed appointments. Classic signs I had willfully ignored because I wanted so badly to believe I'd finally found a true partner. My phone buzzed with a text from Amy. Found Rebecca Turner, now Rebecca Lowell, currently living in Denver with her 5-year-old daughter. Contact established. She's willing to speak with you tomorrow. I sent a quick acknowledgement, then returned to my grandmother's journal, flipping to the last entry she'd written before her death 8 years ago. The pages were worn from multiple readings, the ink slightly faded, but her final advice remained as clear as ever. My dearest Lucia, remember that fortune provides freedom only when properly protected. Trust must be earned through consistent action, not granted through legal ceremony. Keep your assets close, your independence closer, and your wits closest of all. Men may come and go, but the Wilson women endure. I closed the journal and rested my hand on my sleeping daughter's back, feeling the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. We endure, I whispered, and we thrive. Another text arrived, this one from Hank. Flight confirmed for tomorrow. Can't wait to meet our little girl. Love you both so much. I didn't reply. His lies would serve me better unanswered. The video call with Rebecca Lowell began awkwardly. She appeared hesitant, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, circles under her, eyes suggesting the perpetual exhaustion of single motherhood. "I'm not sure what I can tell you that would help," she said after our introductions. "It's been 5 years since Henry disappeared." "Henry," I repeated, noting her use of Hank's full name. "Did you know him as Henry Whitfield?" She nodded. "Yes, though I later discovered his birth certificate listed him as Henry Carson Wilson. The Whitfield came from his mother, apparently." I adjusted Freya in my arms, and Rebecca's expression softened at the sight of my newborn. "Your daughter is beautiful," she said. "How old?" 3 days, I replied. Her eyes widened. 3? She stopped, realization dawning. "He did it to you too? While you were in labor?" I nodded, and the awkwardness between us dissolved, replaced by the immediate bond of shared experience. "Hospital. Delivery room," Rebecca confirmed grimly. I was 7 centimeters dilated when the nurse mentioned a call from the bank about unusual activity. By the time I held Jasmine, he'd taken everything we had, about $90,000. "Did you pursue legal action?" I asked, already knowing the answer from Amy's research but wanting to hear Rebecca's perspective. "I tried," she sighed, "filed police reports, hired a lawyer I couldn't afford, but Henry had covered his tracks well. The money disappeared through a series of transfers, and without funds for a proper investigation." She shrugged. Being a new single mother took priority over chasing a ghost. I shifted slightly, deliberately angling my laptop camera to capture more of Agnes's guest room, the modest furnishings, the borrowed baby items, nothing suggesting wealth or resources. "I understand completely," I said softly. "I'm in the same position now. He took everything, and with Freya to care for." Rebecca's expression hardened. "That's his calculation, isn't it? That we'll be too overwhelmed with newborn care to fight back effectively, too financially drained to pursue him legally?" "Exactly," I agreed. "It's a deliberate strategy." Rebecca hesitated, then asked, "Did he marry you under his real name? Or was it another alias?" "Hank Wilson," I replied. "Though I've just learned that's not his legal name either." She whistled low. "At least I got his real last name." "Small comfort." She shifted, adjusting something off-screen. "What do you need from me, Lucia? I want to help, but I've moved on, built a new life." I carefully considered my next words. The conversation had reached its crucial juncture. "Rebecca, what I'm about to tell you must remain between us," I began, lowering my voice as if concerned about being overheard. "I'm not who Hank thinks I am." She frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" "The woman Hank married, marketing executive with modest savings, was a carefully constructed identity," I explained. "My real name is Lucia Wilson, of the Wilson Real Estate Group." Recognition flickered across her face. "Wilson, as in the commercial developments? The hotel chain?" I nodded slowly. "My grandmother founded the company. My mother expanded it. I inherited everything when she died." Rebecca's mouth fell open slightly. "You're wealthy? Actually wealthy?" "Very," I confirmed simply. "Hank never knew. After a previous relationship, where money was the motivation, I decided to keep my financial status private until I was certain of his character." "And good thing you did," Rebecca murmured, visibly processing this revelation. "The money Hank stole from our joint accounts was insignificant compared to my actual resources," I continued. "But his actions revealed his true character, just as my grandmother always warned they might." I shifted Freya to my shoulder, patting her back gently. "Rebecca, I have the resources to track Hank down, to recover what he stole from both of us, and to ensure he faces consequences. But I need your help." Her posture straightened, a new alertness in her expression. "What kind of help? Documentation? Testimony? Evidence connecting your case to mine and possibly others? With multiple victims establishing a pattern, we can..." Build a case for systematic fraud rather than simple theft. Rebecca's hesitation was visible. I don't know, Lucia. I've worked hard to put that chapter behind me. I understand, I assured her, and I wouldn't ask if there weren't other women at risk. I paused deliberately. He's already grooming his next victim, a woman named Melanie Hargrove. That caught her attention. He's planning to do it again? He's already purchased engagement. Rings from 3 different jewelers in Seattle, I said, sharing one of the details Amy had uncovered. Presumably shopping for the perfect one. Meanwhile, he's draining Melanie's accounts to fund their new life together, a life he'll abandon. Once he's taken everything he can. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "What exactly would I need to do?" I outlined my plan, the documentation needed, the legal process, the potential outcomes. Throughout my explanation, I maintained the appearance of a woman operating from a position of hidden strength rather than obvious power. The illusion of secrecy was crucial. I needed Rebecca to see me as someone who understood the value of maintaining a disguised identity. When I finished, Rebecca took a deep breath. Hank, whatever his name is. He took more than money from me. He took years of my life, my trust, my daughter's chance at having a father. Her voice hardened with resolve. If I can prevent that happening to someone else, I'll do whatever you need. Thank you, I said, truly grateful. My attorney will contact you tomorrow with details. Everything will be handled with complete confidentiality. As our call ended, Rebecca offered one final observation. You know what's ironic? He left me thinking he'd ruined me financially when actually he gave me my freedom. I'm happier now than I ever was with him. I looked down at Freya, peacefully sleeping against my shoulder. I understand completely. After ending the call, I texted Amy, Rebecca is on board. Proceed with Phase 1. Then I carefully placed Freya in her bassinet and opened my laptop to the Wilson Enterprises secure portal. It was time to deploy resources that Hank couldn't begin to imagine. Resources that would make his carefully constructed exit strategy crumble like a house of cards. The next morning, while Agnes took Freya for a walk in the borrowed stroller, I initiated the first concrete steps of my response. Seated at Agnes's kitchen table with my laptop open, I began methodically documenting everything related to Hank's deception. I created a secure digital file containing all bank statements, communication records, and marriage documents. Each file was carefully labeled and time-stamped, creating an unbroken chain of evidence. I added screenshots of Hank's text messages about his supposedly delayed flights and meetings, cross-referenced with the evidence Amy had uncovered about his actual whereabouts. Next, I drafted a detailed timeline starting from the day we met through the present, noting significant financial transactions, key conversations about money, and the establishment of our joint accounts. The timeline revealed a clear pattern. Each of Hank's major withdrawals from his personal accounts had occurred within days of our discussions about the baby, after the first ultrasound, following our decision on a nursery theme, the day after, our childbirth class. He had used these emotional milestones as cover for his financial maneuvering. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Hank. Landing in Portland now. We'll grab lunch, then head to Agnes's. Need anything for you or Freya? I studied the message, considering how to maintain the illusion of ignorance. Just you, I replied, the same simple message designed to continue the pretense that I remained oblivious to his betrayal. With the documentation complete, I accessed a hidden email account and composed a message to Judith Harrison, CEO of Wilson Security Services, a specialized firm within the Wilson corporate structure. Judith, I wrote, I require a comprehensive security package for the attached subject. Level 3 protocols, effective immediately. Priority Alpha. I attached Hank's photograph and all identifying information, then added Melanie Hargrove's details. Level 3 meant discrete surveillance, complete monitoring of electronic communications, and real-time location tracking. Priority Alpha designated this as a direct request from family leadership. Next, I called Vernon, who answered on the first ring. "The Fitzgerald portfolio is ready for review," he said, using our prearranged code to indicate that the financial forensics team had completed their analysis of Hank's activities. "Summary?" I requested, keeping my voice low despite being alone in the house. Vernon reported that Hank had been systematically converting liquid assets to cash for approximately 14 months, totaling over $340,000, significantly higher than our initial estimate. The money had gone to 3 main repositories: the Seattle condo down payment, $190,000, a safety deposit box containing an estimated $160,000 in cash, and a joint account with Melanie, $65,000. The remainder had been spent on luxury items and travel. "What about our prenuptial agreement?" I asked. "Any attempts to challenge it?" "He consulted with a family law attorney in Seattle 3 months ago," Vernon confirmed. "The attorney correctly advised that the agreement was ironclad regarding premarital assets, but noted potential vulnerability around assets acquired during the marriage. This explained Hank's strategy of draining our joint accounts rather than attempting to claim my personal assets through legal channels. The prenuptial agreement, which he had signed without thorough review, protected my premarital wealth, but contained deliberate ambiguity around joint assets, ambiguity that had served as bait. Have Amy prepare documentation for a restraining order, I instructed. We won't file yet, but I want it ready. As I closed my laptop, I heard Agnes's key in the front door. Through the window, I could see a silver sedan parked across the street, the car Amy had assigned for my security detail. The quiet, methodical work of the morning had settled me, transforming fear and betrayal into purposeful action. The first moves had been made. Now it was time to see how Hank would respond. Agnes returned with a sleeping Freya and news that several neighbors had stopped her to offer congratulations. As Agnes prepared tea, I sat in the living room, gazing down at my daughter's peaceful face. In my pocket, I carried a small object I'd retrieved from my emergency go-bag, a smooth river stone, no larger than a $50, with a single word etched into its surface: foundations. My grandmother had given it to me on my 21st birthday, the day I officially inherited my portion of the Wilson estate. "This stone comes from the riverbed where I bought my first property," she'd told me, pressing it into my palm. "I keep it to remember that empires aren't built on dreams or luck, but on solid foundations of knowledge, caution, and strategic thinking." The stone had become my talisman through every crisis. I'd held it during board meetings where I was the youngest and only woman present. I'd kept it in my pocket the day I signed the paperwork establishing my marketing agency as a front for my actual financial activities. And I'd clutched it tightly the day I discovered Joe's betrayal, drawing strength from its solidity when everything else seemed to be crumbling. Now, as I waited for Hank's next move, I found myself returning to my grandmother's core philosophies, the principles that had guided 3 generations of Wilson women through personal and financial challenges. The first principle: information is power. My grandmother had built her initial real estate portfolio by knowing more than her competitors about zoning changes, development plans, and property values. My mother had expanded our holdings by analyzing market trends before they became obvious to others, and I had protected myself from Hank's betrayal by maintaining a vital information asymmetry. He thought he knew everything about our finances, while I kept the truth carefully concealed. The second principle: patience creates opportunity. Men rush, my grandmother often said, because they believe time is running out. Women wait because we know time reveals truth. Her most profitable investments had come from properties held for decades, developing value while others sought quick returns. The third principle: structure protects substance. The elaborate legal framework surrounding the Wilson fortune, the trusts, holding companies, and diversified assets, wasn't mere financial engineering. It was a defensive architecture designed by women who understood that wealth makes you a target, especially as a woman. And the fourth principle, never confuse a legal partnership with an actual alliance. My grandmother had learned this through her disastrous marriage to my grandfather. My mother had internalized it during her business dealings with men who viewed her as a figurehead, rather than the actual power behind Wilson Enterprises. Marriage is a legal construct, my grandmother once told me. But trust must be earned daily through consistent action, not granted through ceremony. Agnes returned with tea, interrupting my reflections. "You seem deep in thought," she observed, setting the tray on the coffee table. "Just thinking about my grandmother," I replied, accepting a cup. "She raised me to be prepared for situations like this." "What would she say about your situation now?" Agnes asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. I considered the question, running my thumb over the stone in my pocket. She'd say that Hank's betrayal isn't a failure, but a confirmation, that the precautions I took weren't paranoia, but wisdom, and that the path forward isn't about revenge, but strategic response. One of her favorite sayings was, "Men who steal. What isn't theirs eventually lose what is," I continued, shifting Freya to my shoulder. She believed that dishonesty creates vulnerability, that every deception leaves a trail, every betrayal creates an opportunity for justice. My phone buzzed. With a text from Hank. "Caught in traffic, be there by 3. Can't wait to meet our daughter." Another lie. The tracking systems Vernon had activated showed Hank's phone still at the Portland airport, not in transit to Agnes's house at all. The security team arrived at Agnes's house just after 1 p.m., disguised as a baby gift delivery service. 2 women and 1 man, all dressed in muted clothing from an upscale baby boutique, carried elegant gift bags up Agnes's front walk while discreetly scanning the street. I recognized the woman in front immediately, Judith Harrison, Wilson Securities CEO and my mother's former college roommate. At 58, Judith maintained the precise posture of her military background, her silver-streaked hair cut in a practical bob that framed sharp, observant eyes. "Special delivery for the new mother," she announced cheerfully as Agnes opened the door, maintaining the cover story for any watching neighbors. Once inside, Judith's demeanor shifted to focused efficiency. "The perimeter is secure," she reported. "We've established surveillance at all approach points, and the digital security team is monitoring communications." She gestured to her colleagues. "May I introduce Michael Reeves, our technical specialist, and Dr. Leona Wright, who will serve as both security personnel and medical support for you and Freya?" I nodded in approval. Judith had selected the team perfectly. Michael's unassuming appearance concealed his background in cyber intelligence, while Leona's credentials as a board-certified pediatrician provided a legitimate reason for her regular presence. "Sit rep," I requested, using the military terminology Judith preferred. "Subject remains at Portland International Airport," Michael reported, opening what appeared to be a diaper bag but actually contained sophisticated communications equipment. "He's made 17 phone calls in the past 3 hours, primarily to Seattle numbers associated with Melanie Hargrove and the real estate agent." "Financial movements?" I asked. 3 transactions since this morning," Judith replied. "A cash withdrawal of $2,000 from an ATM at the airport, the jewelry purchase downtown, and a wire transfer of $12,500 to a business account belonging to Carlson Consultants." "Another shell company?" I noted. "He's distributing assets to prevent recovery." Agnes watched this exchange with confusion. "I thought you were just having some security come by," she whispered. "This looks like something from a spy movie." I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "The Wilson security protocols might seem excessive, but they've protected my family for generations." Leona approached with a small medical kit. "With your permission, I'd like to do a quick checkup on both you and Freya." While Leona examined us, Michael set up a secure communication hub in Agnes's guest room, and Judith conducted a security, Assessment of the house. Amy arrived next with a thick portfolio and her characteristic brisk efficiency. She barely acknowledged the security team, a professional courtesy reflecting the separate spheres of legal and security operations within the Wilson infrastructure. The complete dossier on Henry Carson Whitfield, also known as Hank Wilson. Henry Wilson and Carson Whitfield, she announced, placing the portfolio on Agnes's dining table. Birth records, education history, employment records, financial statements, criminal background, and comprehensive documentation of his pattern of fraud across multiple relationships. Vernon completed our core team, bringing digital records of all communications between Hank and his employer. He revealed yet another layer of deception. Hank had submitted his resignation 3 weeks ago, effective the previous Friday, but had told me nothing about it. With everyone assembled, I called the meeting to order, acutely aware that time was limited. Hank's tracking data showed he had finally left the airport and was now en route to Agnes's neighborhood. "We have approximately 30 minutes before Hank arrives," I began, shifting into the executive mode I rarely revealed outside the Wilson corporate offices. "Let's establish clear objectives and responsibilities." Part 7. Strategic First Move. 48R56 U. The next morning, while Agnes took Freya for a walk in the borrowed stroller, I initiated the first concrete steps of my response. Seated at Agnes's kitchen table with my laptop open, I began methodically documenting everything related to Hank's deception. I created a secure digital file containing all bank statements, communication records, and marriage documents. Each file was carefully labeled and time-stamped, creating an unbroken chain of evidence. I added screenshots of Hank's text messages about his supposedly delayed flights and meetings, cross-referenced with the evidence Amy had uncovered about his actual whereabouts. Next, I drafted a detailed timeline starting from the day we met through the present, noting significant financial transactions, key conversations about money, and the establishment of our joint accounts. The timeline revealed a clear pattern. Each of Hank's major withdrawals from his personal accounts had occurred within days of our discussions about the baby. After the first ultrasound, following our decision on a nursery theme, the day after. Our childbirth class. He had used these emotional milestones as cover for his financial maneuvering. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from Hank. "Landing in Portland now. We'll grab lunch, then head to Agnes's. Need anything for you or Freya?" I studied the message, considering how to maintain the illusion of ignorance. "Just you," I replied. The same simple message designed to continue the pretense that I remained oblivious to his betrayal. With the documentation complete, I accessed a hidden email account and composed a message to Judith Harrison, CEO of Wilson Security Services, a specialized firm within the Wilson corporate structure. "Judith," I wrote, "I require a comprehensive security package for the attached subject. Level 3 protocols. Effective immediately. Priority Alpha." I attached Hank's photograph and all identifying information, then added Melanie Hargrove's details. Level 3 meant discrete surveillance, complete monitoring of electronic communications, and real-time location tracking. Priority Alpha designated this as a direct request from family leadership. Next, I called Vernon, who answered on the first ring. "The Fitzgerald portfolio is ready for review," he said, using our pre-arranged code to indicate that the financial forensics team had completed their analysis of Hank's activities. "Summary," I requested, keeping my voice low despite being alone in the house. Vernon reported that Hank had been systematically converting liquid assets to cash for approximately 14 months, totaling over $340,000, significantly higher than our initial estimate. The money had gone to 3 main repositories: the Seattle condo down payment, $190,000, a safety deposit box containing an estimated $160,000 in cash, and a joint account with Melanie, $65,000. The remainder had been spent on luxury items and travel. "What about our prenuptial agreement?" I asked. Any attempts to challenge it? He consulted with a family law attorney in Seattle 3 months ago, Vernon confirmed. The attorney correctly advised that the agreement was ironclad regarding premarital assets, but noted potential vulnerability around assets acquired during the marriage. This explained Hank's strategy of draining our joint accounts rather than attempting to claim my personal assets through legal channels. The prenuptial agreement, which he had signed without thorough review, protected my premarital wealth, but contained deliberate ambiguity around joint assets, ambiguity that had served as bait. Have Amy prepare documentation for a restraining order, I instructed. We won't file yet, but I want it ready. As I closed my laptop, I heard Agnes's key in the front door. Through the window, I could see a silver sedan parked across the street, the car Amy had assigned for my security detail. The quiet, methodical work of the morning had settled me, transforming fear and betrayal into purposeful action. The first moves had been made. Now it was time to see how Hank would respond. Hank arrived exactly as Judith had reported, bearing an ostentatious bouquet of roses and a small gift bag with the Garrison Jewelers logo embossed in gold. His performance was flawless, eyes widening. At the sight of Freya, voice catching with manufactured emotion as he whispered, "She's perfect." I played my role with equal precision, accepting his kiss on my forehead, thanking him for the flowers, expressing appropriate gratitude for the diamond pendant he fastened around my neck with hands that lingered just long enough to seem loving. "I'm so sorry about the travel delays," he said, his voice a masterpiece of contrition. "The Seattle meetings ran long, then flight cancellations." "It doesn't matter now," I assured him, the picture of a forgiving wife. "You're here." Agnes watched from the kitchen doorway, her expression carefully neutral despite the disgust I knew she felt. Leona maintained her cover as a postpartum doula, discreetly checking Freya's temperature while explaining breastfeeding techniques as if we hadn't already established a comfortable rhythm. For nearly 2 hours, Hank sustained his performance, cradling Freya awkwardly but photographing himself doing so from multiple angles, asking appropriate questions about the birth, expressing concern about our drained savings with just the right note of shocked dismay. "I'll call the bank first thing tomorrow," he promised. "There must have been some kind of fraud. We'll get it sorted out." I nodded, allowing a hint of worry to show. "I hope so." That was everything we had. His eyes softened with what might have appeared to be compassion, but what I recognized as satisfaction. The trap he believed he'd set had been sprung. His prey appeared suitably ensnared. "Don't worry," he soothed, squeezing my hand. "I'll take care of everything. We should head home tomorrow. You'll recover better in familiar surroundings." This was the pivot I'd been expecting, his attempt to separate me from Agnes's support and surveillance. "The doctor wants me to stay here through the weekend," I countered gently. "Agnes has been so helpful, and I'm still having some complications. A slight exaggeration, but necessary to justify my reluctance." Hank frowned momentarily before recovering. "Of course, whatever you need. I'll stay too. Sleep on the couch." Another test passed. He'd offered to stay despite clearly having no intention of doing so. Within 30 minutes, his phone buzzed with what I knew was a fabricated emergency. Call from work, requiring his immediate attention. "I'm so sorry," he said, all earnest regret. "Critical issue with the Seattle account. I need to handle this tonight, but I'll be back first thing tomorrow." He kissed me again, this time on the lips. "I love you both so much." After he left, Agnes locked the door and leaned against it. "That was the most disturbing thing I've ever witnessed," she declared. "He didn't mean a single word." "No," I agreed, removing the diamond pendant and placing it in an evidence bag Michael provided. "But he said exactly what we needed him to say." Judith entered from the back door where she'd been monitoring the interaction. "Subject is departing the neighborhood. GPS tracker indicates movement toward downtown Portland." "Phase 1 complete," I noted, returning to my seat at the dining table where the team had reconvened. Let's proceed with Phase 2. While Hank believed he was executing the final steps of his escape plan, we were implementing a strategy designed not just to recover what he had stolen from me, but to dismantle his entire operation. A strategy that had been developing in my mind since the moment I saw that bank notification. A strategy guided by my grandmother's philosophy of patient, methodical response to betrayal. Unlike the immediate, emotional reactions Hank had counted on, the Wilson approach to crisis had always been calculated and comprehensive. We didn't just solve problems, we transformed them into opportunities. The long game, my grandmother called it, is always more satisfying than the quick strike. Later that night, after the team had departed and Agnes had gone to bed, I stood before the bathroom mirror, studying my reflection in the harsh fluorescent light. The woman looking back at me appeared outwardly unchanged. The same dark hair, now pulled into a messy bun, the same eyes perhaps slightly shadowed from new motherhood, the same features that had smiled beside Hank in countless photographs documenting our life together. Yet internally, a transformation had occurred. The woman who had entered the hospital as Hank's wife, anxious about his absence but still believing in the partnership they had built, no longer existed. In her place stood someone I recognized from years before, the woman who had emerged from Joe's betrayal, clear-eyed and resolute. I removed the diamond pendant from its evidence bag and examined it closely. 3 carats, princess cut, set in white gold with small accent stones. Flashy but not extraordinarily expensive, precisely as I had predicted. The gift of a man who understood the appearance of generosity, but not its substance. I returned it to the bag, labeling it with the date and circumstances of receipt. From my toiletry bag, I retrieved the wedding band Hank had placed on my finger 3 years earlier. I had removed it in the hospital when my fingers had swollen during labor, and hadn't put it back on since seeing the bank notification. Now, looking at the simple gold band, I felt nothing. No sentimentality, no attachment, not even anger. It was merely an object, a prop in a performance that had reached its final act. I placed the ring in another evidence bag, labeling it carefully. Then I unpinned my hair, letting it fall around my shoulders, and washed my face clean of the minimal makeup I had applied for Hank's visit. The cool water felt purifying somehow, washing away not just the physical traces of the day, but the last pretenses of the role I had been playing. Freya stirred in her bassinet, making the small mewling sounds that preceded waking. I lifted her, gently cradling her against my chest as I moved to the window seat overlooking Agnes's garden. The security lights cast soft illumination over the flowering shrubs, creating pools of light and shadow across the carefully tended beds. "Things will be different now," I whispered to Freya as she nuzzled against me, seeking comfort and nourishment. Different, but better. As she nursed, I allowed myself to fully embrace the reality of our situation. Hank would not return tomorrow, as promised. The critical issue with the Seattle account would expand into a multi-day emergency, then transform into an unavoidable business trip. The texts would grow less frequent, the excuses more elaborate, until eventually he would disappear, entirely. Likely after confirming that the money from our accounts was safely beyond recovery. In his narrative, he was abandoning a financially devastated new mother, leaving her to rebuild a life shattered by his betrayal. In reality, he was providing me with everything needed to ensure he faced consequences while freeing me from a marriage that had been built on carefully constructed falsehoods. The irony was not lost on me. By attempting to destroy me financially, Hank had inadvertently liberated me from the final constraints of my disguised identity. No longer did I need to maintain the fiction of being a moderately successful marketing executive married to a mid-level operations manager. No longer did I need to downplay my intelligence, my resources, or my ambition to preserve his ego. For 3 years, I had lived as Lucia Wilson, Hank's wife. Now I could fully reclaim my identity as Lucia Wilson, heir to the Wilson fortune business, leader and mother. I looked down at Freya, now sleeping peacefully after nursing. Your grandmother would say this is a blessing disguised as a crisis, I told her softly. A chance to build something authentic from the ruins of something false. With that thought, I made a decision. The time for hiding, for maintaining separate identities and compartmentalized lives, had passed. When morning came, I would begin the process of fully integrating the separate spheres I had maintained, not just for my own peace of mind, but for Freya's future. My daughter deserved to grow up in truth, not shadowlands of partial disclosure and strategic concealment. She deserved to know the full legacy of the Wilson women, not a carefully edited version designed to protect a man's fragile sense of superiority. Time to step into the light, I whispered, as the first hints of dawn appeared on the horizon. The eye. Following morning brought confirmation of what I had already known. Hank would not be returning to Agnes's house. A carefully crafted text arrived at 7:43 a.m. Emergency meetings all day. Client in crisis. Will try to break away this evening. How are my girls? I responded with deliberate warmth, maintaining the illusion that I remained oblivious to his true intentions. Meanwhile, Amy and her team had arrived early, transforming Agnes's dining room into a makeshift evidence processing center. The table was covered with labeled folders, each containing meticulously organized documentation of Hank's deception. We've established 5 distinct categories of evidence, Amy explained, indicating the color-coded system. Financial records in blue, communication records in green, witness statements in yellow, pattern documentation in red, and physical evidence in black. I examined each category carefully, impressed by the thoroughness of their work. The financial records detailed not just Hank's theft from our joint accounts, but the systematic liquidation of his assets over the preceding 14 months. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, wire transfer confirmations, each transaction meticulously documented and cross-referenced. The communication records were equally comprehensive. Text messages, emails, phone logs, and social media interactions, all revealing the careful construction of his parallel life with Melanie. Most damning were the messages where he discussed our finances, sharing confidential information about my income and savings with his mistress. This violates both your prenuptial agreement and Washington state privacy laws, Amy noted, highlighting specific exchanges. The unauthorized disclosure of financial information alone provides grounds for significant civil penalties. The witness statements included formal depositions from Rebecca and 2 other previous victims, each describing nearly identical patterns of behavior. The testimonies were powerful in their similarity: the careful grooming, the gradual access to financial accounts, the strategic exits timed to moments of maximum vulnerability. Pattern documentation covered the broader evidence of premeditation, the establishment of shell companies, the creation of alternate identities, the rental of storage units in Seattle under false names. Amy had even obtained insurance records showing Hank had taken out a substantial policy on my life shortly after I became pregnant, a discovery that sent a chill through the room. We've flagged this for potential criminal investigation, Amy said quietly. While there's no direct evidence of intent to harm, the timing and circumstances raise serious concerns. The physical evidence was perhaps the most viscerally impactful. The diamond pendant gifted during his performance of devoted fatherhood, receipts for jewelry purchased for both me and Melanie, the rental agreement for a storage unit in Seattle, containing packed suitcases ready for a quick departure. The cumulative evidence establishes a clear pattern of systematic fraud, Amy summarized, closing the final folder. Both civil and criminal cases can be pursued successfully. I nodded, absorbing the full scope of the documentation. And our immediate legal position? Strong and getting stronger, Amy replied. We've secured temporary freezes on all identified accounts through financial fraud protocols. Forensic accountants, are tracing every dollar. The birth certificate has been filed with your information, and Hank's, establishing legal paternity. Vernon added, We've also documented his pattern of misrepresentation to employers. 3 companies confirm he fabricated credentials on his resume, including his claimed MBA from Northwestern. As I reviewed the evidence, a notification arrived from Judith's security team. Hank had checked out of his Portland hotel and was en route to the airport, his phone showing ticket purchases for a flight to Seattle departing at 11:40 a.m. He's accelerating his timeline, I observed. The business emergency provides cover for his departure, and he likely assumes I'm too overwhelmed with newborn care to immediately pursue the missing funds. Amy nodded agreement. Classic exit strategy. He'll probably maintain sporadic communication. For another few days, growing increasingly distant, before disappearing completely. I closed the last folder and looked around the table at the team assembled to protect my interests. Professionals who had worked with the Wilson family for years, executing contingency plans established long before Hank entered my life. My grandmother would be proud, I said, a small smile forming. She always said the best defense is prepared before it's needed. The evidence spread before us represented not just documentation of a betrayal, but the foundation for justice, methodically gathered, legally obtained, and devastatingly complete. What's our next move? Vernon asked. I checked my phone, noting another text from Hank. More excuses, more delays, the threads of connection growing thinner. We let him think he's succeeded, I replied, while we prepare to show him how thoroughly he's failed. 3 days passed with Hank maintaining the charade of the devoted but unavoidably detained father. His texts grew predictably less frequent, his excuses increasingly elaborate. The Seattle client had expanded to an international crisis requiring his personal attention in Vancouver. The return flight had mechanical issues. His phone had limited reception in remote meeting locations. Each fabrication was documented, time-stamped, and added to the growing evidence file while Judith's team tracked his actual movements. A comfortable hotel in downtown Seattle, dinner reservations with Melanie, visits to the new condo, and multiple financial institutions. On the 4th day, I decided it was time for the first direct confrontation, not an emotional showdown, but a strategic revelation that would force Hank to adapt his plans, potentially making mistakes in the process. I'm going to call him, I announced to Amy and Vernon during our morning briefing. Not to accuse, but to introduce an unexpected variable. They exchanged glances, professional concern evident in their expressions. Are you certain that's wise? Amy asked carefully. We have sufficient evidence already. Direct contact might alert him to our investigation. I agree with the concern, Vernon added, but I understand the strategy. Sometimes disrupting a pattern reveals new information. I nodded appreciation for their perspectives while remaining firm in my decision. I'll maintain the appearance of ignorance about his betrayal. This is about establishing a timeline requirement that disrupts his current exit plan. After outlining my approach, I placed the call on speakerphone with recording equipment activated. Hank answered on the 4th ring, background noise suggesting he was in a public space. Lucia, hey, he greeted, forced cheerfulness barely masking impatience. How are my girls? We're managing, I replied, injecting just enough weariness into my tone to sound like a struggling new mother. Freya's having some jaundice issues. The pediatrician wants to see her tomorrow, and I really need you here for this appointment, Hank. A pause, then. Tomorrow? Babe, I'm still stuck in Vancouver. These clients… I understand, I interrupted. Gently, but this is important. Dr. Winters specifically asked why you haven't been at any of Freya's checkups. This was the disruption, introducing a medical concern and external authority figure who had noticed his absence. I continued before he could formulate a response. She mentioned potential testing they might want to run, family medical history, documentation they need from both parents. It sounded serious, Hank. Another pause. longer this time. I could almost hear him recalculating, weighing his exit strategy against this new complication. "What time is the appointment?" he finally asked. 10:30, at Portland Memorial. "I'll try to get a flight tonight," he offered, the reluctance evident beneath his concerned father performance. "Can't promise anything with these mechanical issues they're having, but I'll do my best." "Thank you," I said, allowing relief to color my voice. "We really need you here." After ending the call, I looked to Vernon and Amy. "He won't come," I stated with certainty. "No," Vernon agreed. "But he'll have to create a new excuse, something substantial enough to justify missing. A medical appointment for his newborn. And whatever he creates will generate new evidence," Amy added, understanding dawning in her expression. Within 30 minutes, our prediction was confirmed. Hank called back, voice tight with manufactured distress. "Lucia, I'm so sorry. There's been an accident. Jack from the Vancouver office was in a serious car crash, and I'm the only one who can handle the client transition. They've asked me to stay through the weekend." He paused for effect. "I tried to explain about Freya, but millions in contracts are at stake. I'll make it up to both of you, I promise." "Of course," I soothed, playing my role perfectly. "Family. Emergencies come first. I understand." After hanging up, I turned to Amy. "Contact the Vancouver office. Confirm there's no employee named Jack, no accident, no client emergency." "Already on it," she replied, typing rapidly on her tablet. Vernon checked the flight tracker on his laptop. He's just purchased a one-way ticket to Bora Bora, departing tomorrow at 6 a.m., connecting through Los Angeles. I nodded, a grim satisfaction settling over me. So he's accelerated his final exit. The appointment request forced his hand. The confrontation had achieved exactly what I'd intended, disrupting Hank's carefully constructed timeline and pushing him toward hasty actions that created additional evidence. His fictitious Vancouver emergency would be easily disproven, adding another documented lie to our case file. The sudden ticket purchase suggested panic rather than planned departure, indicating he feared I might begin questioning his absences more aggressively. "Alert Judith," I instructed Vernon. "I want surveillance increased at all transportation points, and contact the federal authorities. It's time to formally file the fraud complaints." As Vernon made the necessary calls, I found myself reflecting on the subtle power of strategic confrontation. Without revealing my knowledge or resources, I had altered the trajectory of Hank's escape plan, creating new vulnerabilities we could exploit in the process. My grandmother would have approved. "Sometimes," she once told me, "the most effective move isn't striking your opponent, but simply changing the board beneath their feet." The following morning brought confirmation that Hank had indeed boarded a flight, not to Bora Bora as initially planned, but to Miami, a last-minute change that suggested growing paranoia. Meanwhile, Vernon had uncovered something unexpected while investigating Hank's communications with Melanie. "She's gone dark," he reported, showing me the communication logs. No texts, calls, or emails between them for the past 36 hours. Her social media accounts have been either locked down or deactivated entirely. This development intrigued me. "Has she left Seattle?" "No," Vernon replied. "Credit card activity shows she purchased groceries yesterday evening near her apartment. But she canceled her scheduled showing at the new condo and withdrew $8,000 from her personal account, just under the reporting threshold." I considered this information, seeing possibilities in this unexpected fracture. "Something has changed between them. I want to know what." Amy suggested a direct approach. "We could have someone from the Seattle office make contact, perhaps under the guise of a real estate follow-up." "No," I decided. "I'll speak with her myself." Both Amy and Vernon looked startled by this proposal. "That presents significant risks," Amy cautioned. "Direct contact could compromise our legal strategy." "Or strengthen it," I countered. "Melanie clearly has doubts. She may be more valuable as a witness than a co-defendant." After discussing parameters for the contact, I placed the call while Amy recorded and Vernon monitored Melanie's digital footprint in real time. The phone rang several times before a cautious voice answered. "Hello? Melanie Hargrove?" I kept my tone neutral, professional. "This is Lucia Wilson. I believe we have a mutual acquaintance in Hank Wilson." Silence stretched for several seconds before she responded, her voice tight with tension. "How did you get this number?" "The same way I found the condo purchase agreement with both your names. The same way I discovered the joint accounts and the flight reservations to Bora Bora." I paused deliberately. "The same way I learned about the other women before me." Another silence, then. "What do you want?" "Information," I replied simply. "I think you've recently discovered some things about Hank that concern you. Things that made you withdraw cash and cancel condo viewings." Her sharp intake of breath confirmed my suspicion. "You've been watching me? Protecting my interests," I corrected. "Just as you're now protecting yours." The line went quiet again, but she didn't hang up, a promising sign. Finally, Melanie spoke, her voice lower, almost confessional. "I found some documents in his laptop bag 3 days ago. Financial statements with different names, blank ID templates." She hesitated. "And a draft email to someone named Carson about meeting in Belize next month. Not Bora Bora with me." This was new information, another identity, another escape plan that apparently didn't include Melanie. I kept my voice steady, sympathetic. "He's done this before, Melanie, multiple times." "I'm starting to realize that," she admitted, bitterness edging her words. "The perfect man with the perfect plan for our perfect future." God, I sound so stupid saying it out loud. "You're not stupid," I assured her. "He's practiced at this. Tell me about how you met." As Melanie described her whirlwind romance with Hank, the chance meeting at a pharmaceutical conference, his persistent courtship, the gradual integration into her financial life, the pattern was unmistakable. Each step mirrored his approach with me and the women before me, refined slightly but fundamentally unchanged. "Did he ask you to liquidate retirement accounts for the condo down payment?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Yes," she confirmed. "But I only transferred half the amount he requested." Something felt off. Her instinctive caution had likely saved her from the complete financial devastation Hank had planned. I found myself respecting her awareness, her willingness to question despite emotional investment. "Melanie, I'm building a case against Hank for systematic fraud," I explained carefully. "Your testimony could help ensure he doesn't do this to anyone else." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "What would that involve?" "Documentation of your relationship, financial records, any communications showing his intent, a formal statement to authorities." I paused. "I understand this is difficult. Take time to consider." "I don't need time," she replied, surprising me with her firmness. "I want him stopped, and I want my money back." After arranging for Amy's Seattle associate to meet with Melanie that afternoon, I ended the call with a sense of cautious optimism. In Melanie, we had not just another victim, but a potential ally whose testimony could significantly strengthen the case. Vernon looked impressed. "You turned a potential adversary into an asset. People respond to respect and shared purpose," I replied, thinking of my grandmother's approach to business negotiations. Melanie was deceived just as I was. Our interests align in seeing Hank held accountable. The discovery of Hank's planned meeting in Belize added a new dimension to our investigation. Vernon immediately began researching financial connections to the country, discovering an account opened 6 months earlier under the name Carson Whitfield, with transfers totaling over $140,000. "Another escape hatch," Amy observed. "He created contingencies even within his contingencies." "Which means we need to move quickly," I concluded, "before he disappears behind offshore banking protections." As Vernon and Amy coordinated with federal authorities, I reflected on how each new discovery revealed not just the extent of Hank's deception, but the limitations of his imagination. For all his elaborate planning, he had relied on the same basic strategies, the same predictable escape routes, never considering that he might have chosen a target capable of not just tracking his movements, but anticipating them. In this, he had made the same fundamental error as my grandfather and Joe, underestimating a Wilson woman's capacity for strategic response. 1 week after Hank's departure, as Freya entered her second week of life, our team gathered at the lake house for final preparation before executing the endgame strategy. I had relocated there 3 days earlier, when it became clear that Hank had abandoned his pretense of returning to Portland. The secluded property, surrounded by 20 acres of wooded hillside overlooking a private lake, provided both security and serenity as we prepared for the confrontation ahead. The great room, with its wall of windows facing the water, had been transformed into a command center. Digital displays tracked financial movements across multiple accounts, while a central table held the now substantial evidence files organized into actionable categories. "We're proceeding on 3 simultaneous fronts," Amy explained, standing before the assembled team. "Civil action for financial recovery, criminal complaints for wire fraud and identity theft, and regulatory filings with financial authorities in 4 jurisdictions." Judith provided security updates from her position by the fireplace. "Subject remains in Miami but has made inquiries about charter boats to the Bahamas. Passport activity shows he's traveling under the Henry Wilson identity, but has accessed a safety deposit box containing alternate documentation." "The federal authorities have been fully briefed," Vernon added. "Based on the evidence we've provided, particularly the pattern of interstate activity and Melanie's testimony, they've agreed to pursue federal charges. Arrest warrants are being prepared." I listened to each report while nursing Freya. The juxtaposition of my maternal role and executive function no longer feeling contradictory but complementary. My daughter's presence remained a constant reminder of why this careful preparation mattered, not just for financial recovery, but for establishing the truth that would one day become part of her history. "What's the timeline for account recovery?" I asked, directing the question to the forensic accounting team. "We've traced approximately 82% of the diverted funds," reported Sophia Chen, our lead financial investigator. "The Seattle accounts have been frozen through court order. The Belize transfers are more challenging but not impossible given the documentation we've assembled." I nodded, satisfied with the progress. The money itself was insignificant to me. The joint accounts Hank had drained represented less than 0.3% of my actual net worth, but the principle of recovery mattered. Each dollar reclaimed represented not just financial restitution, but a systematic dismantling of Hank's carefully constructed exit strategy. "And Melanie's cooperation?" I asked, turning to Amy. "Exceeding expectations," Amy confirmed. "She's provided complete access to all communications, financial records, and has signed a comprehensive affidavit detailing his manipulation. Most significantly, she had documented his requests that she liquidate additional assets for what he claimed was their future together. This represented perhaps our greatest strategic advantage, evidence of Hank's intent to defraud not just his past victims but his planned future ones. The documented pattern transformed individual incidents of questionable financial behavior into a provable scheme of systematic fraud. As the team continued their reports, I found myself reflecting on how thoroughly we had mapped Hank's activities, motivations, and vulnerabilities. We had identified his banking patterns, his communication habits, his preferred escape routes. We had documented his aliases, his shell companies, his hidden accounts. Most importantly, we had connected with his previous victims, establishing a pattern that spanned years and crossed multiple state lines. All that remained was the final confrontation. Not a dramatic personal showdown as he might have expected from a wronged wife, but a coordinated legal intervention designed to dismantle Everything he had built. Tomorrow morning, we move simultaneously on all fronts, I instructed, my decision firm. Financial freezes, criminal complaints, civil filings. I want him to experience the full weight of consequence at once, with no opportunity to shift resources or create new contingencies. The team acknowledged the directive with professional nods. This was not revenge, but resolution, a carefully constructed response to systematic deception. Agnes, who had joined us at the lake house after her initial reluctance to be separated from Freya, watched the proceedings with wide eyes. "It's remarkable," she observed quietly. "How prepared you were for this. How quickly you've assembled all of this." "Not quickly," I corrected gently. "My grandmother established these protocols decades ago. Each generation of Wilson women has refined them, hoping they would never be needed but ensuring they would be available if they were." Vernon approached with a final document requiring my signature, the formal complaint naming Henry Carson Whitfield, a.k.a. Hank Wilson, as the perpetrator of systematic financial fraud against multiple victims. As I signed, I felt not anger or vindictiveness but a sense of appropriate closure. Tomorrow would bring consequences that Hank had never anticipated, from a source he had fundamentally underestimated. My grandmother always said that the most dangerous opponent is the one you don't recognize as an opponent at all, I told Agnes, as the meeting concluded. Hank never saw me clearly, not as his wife, not as Freya's mother, and certainly not as his adversary. That blindness had been his most significant miscalculation, and would be the foundation of his downfall. The coordinated legal intervention began at precisely 8 a.m. Eastern Time, when Hank attempted to access his Miami hotel room safe and found his keycard deactivated. By 8:17, as he argued with hotel management, federal agents arrived with a warrant for his arrest on charges of wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, and identity theft. I watched the arrest unfold via secure video link, transmitted by Judith's team member positioned in the hotel lobby. Hank's expression as the agents approached told its own story. Initial confusion giving way to disbelief, then something close to panic as handcuffs were applied and Miranda rights recited. Simultaneously, across multiple jurisdictions, the legal machinery we had set in motion executed with synchronized precision. In Seattle, federal agents secured the condo Hank had intended to purchase, preventing the scheduled closing and freezing the substantial down payment. In Portland, court officers delivered formal notice of civil proceedings to our former home, establishing legal record of the claims against Hank's assets. In 3 different states, previous victims filed coordinated police reports, retroactively documenting the pattern of fraud that connected their experiences to mine. Most significantly, in the digital realm, forensic financial specialists executed court-authorized freezes on 27 separate accounts across 12 financial institutions, capturing the fragmented trail of stolen funds before they could be moved beyond jurisdictional reach. "First, phase complete," Vernon reported, monitoring the activity feeds. "All primary targets secured. Subject is in federal custody. Assets frozen. Documentation served." Amy nodded in satisfaction. "The Miami prosecutor has confirmed they'll seek denial of bail based on flight risk and pattern of identity concealment. Arraignment is scheduled for tomorrow morning." I shifted Freya to my shoulder, gently patting her back as I absorbed the reports of Hank's rapidly collapsing world. The man who had planned to be sipping cocktails on a Bora Bora beach by sunset was instead being processed into a federal detention center, his carefully constructed escape routes systematically blocked, his hidden resources methodically exposed. "Has he requested legal representation?" I asked. "Yes," Amy replied. "He's asked for a public defender, claiming his assets are inaccessible. The irony is remarkable." Indeed it was. The man who had drained my accounts while I was in labor, believing he was leaving me financially devastated, now found himself genuinely destitute, dependent on court-appointed counsel while a team of the country's top financial and legal experts dismantled his schemes. "What happens next?" Agnes asked, clearly, trying to comprehend the scale and speed of the intervention. The criminal proceedings will move at their own pace, Amy explained. But the civil recovery efforts can proceed simultaneously. We've already secured temporary orders freezing all identified assets pending resolution. Vernon added, the federal prosecutor has indicated willingness to include restitution for all victims as part of any potential plea agreement. Given the strength of the evidence, they're expecting Hank to seek terms rather than risk trial. The most surprising development came shortly after noon, when Judith received word that Hank had asked to speak with me. The request had come through his appointed attorney, a conversation to resolve matters privately before proceedings advanced further. It's a manipulation attempt, Amy cautioned immediately. He's looking for leverage or sympathy. Or trying to gauge how much you actually know, Vernon suggested. He may be hoping this is a simple angry wife response that he can manage, rather than the comprehensive legal intervention it actually is. I considered the request carefully, weighing the potential risks against the opportunity for final resolution. I'll speak with him, I decided, but on my terms, with full recording and legal representation present. The call was arranged for Thursday p.m., conducted via secure video conference with Hank appearing from a small interview room in the detention center. He looked disheveled, the confident executive persona replaced by something altogether more desperate. His eyes widened slightly as I appeared on his screen, Freya sleeping peacefully in my arms, not in Agnes's modest guest room, but framed by the unmistakable luxury of the lake house's great room. Lucia, he began, his voice attempting warmth, despite the circumstances. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. If we could just talk privately— There's no misunderstanding, Hank, I interrupted calmly. Or should I call you Henry? Or perhaps Carson? You seem to use different names in different circumstances. His expression faltered briefly before he attempted recovery. You're upset about the money. I understand that. But there's an explanation. For draining our accounts while I was giving birth? I asked, keeping my tone even. For establishing shell companies to hide the transfers? For purchasing one-way tickets to Bora Bora? For the other women before me who experienced exactly the same pattern of fraud? With each question, his face registered increasing shock, the realization dawning that this was no emotional confrontation, but a precisely targeted deconstruction of his scheme. How did you— he began, then stopped, reassessing. Look, whatever you think you know, we can work this out between us, for Freya's sake. I studied him through the screen. This man who had shared my home, my bed, my life for 3 years, and who had remained a stranger throughout. In his eyes, I could see him recalculating, searching for the angle, the approach, the vulnerability that might offer escape. There's nothing to work out, Hank, I replied simply. The federal prosecutors have everything. The accounts, the aliases, the pattern across multiple victims. This isn't about emotion or negotiation. It's about consequence. As the full implication of his situation became clear, Hank's desperate charm gave way to something harder, more authentic in its naked self-interest. What do you want? There must be something you want. I adjusted Freya gently in my arms, allowing him a clear view of the daughter he had abandoned. Just this, for you to understand exactly who you attempted to victimize. Not a vulnerable new mother with limited resources, but a Wilson woman with generations of preparation for men exactly like you. The name registered instantly. Wilson, not as a common surname, but as the financial dynasty it actually represented. His eyes darted around the visible portion of the lake house, recognition dawning as context finally aligned. You're that Wilson? He asked, incredulity breaking through his practiced control. The real estate family? I am, I confirmed simply. And you never knew because you never bothered to look beyond the surface I presented. You saw what you expected to see, a conventional wife with conventional resources that could be conventionally stolen. The video call ended shortly thereafter, Hank having nothing to offer but desperate proposals that held no interest for me. As his image disappeared from the screen, I felt not triumph, but a quiet sense of completion. The confrontation hadn't been about revenge or even justice in the emotional sense, but about establishing truth, a clear record of actions and consequences that would become part of our family history. "Well done," Amy said quietly as the call disconnected. "Perfectly handled." I looked down at Freya, still sleeping peacefully despite the momentous exchange she had just witnessed. "It wasn't for me," I told Amy. "It was for her. Someday she'll need to understand who her father was and why he isn't part of her life. Now there will be a clear record, not just of his choices, but of how I responded to them." In that response lay perhaps the most important lesson of all, that a Wilson woman meets betrayal not with helpless victimhood, but with strategic resolve, transforming crisis into opportunity through preparation, patience, and unwavering clarity about her own worth. 6 months after Hank's arrest, I stood on the terrace of the lake house, watching autumn leaves drift onto the water's surface. Freya, now strong enough to hold her head up during tummy time, lay on a blanket beside me, batting at colorful toys suspended from an activity arch. The legal proceedings against Hank had progressed with systematic efficiency, faced with overwhelming evidence from multiple victims and jurisdictions. He had accepted a plea agreement that included significant prison time, financial restitution, and permanent restrictions on his future financial activities. The civil cases had been similarly resolved, with court-ordered recovery of assets wherever possible. More importantly, I had emerged from the experience fundamentally transformed, not broken or diminished as Hank had intended, but strengthened and clarified in purpose. The most significant change had been my decision to fully integrate the separate aspects of my life. No longer did I maintain the fiction of Lucia, the marketing executive, as distinct from Lucia, the Wilson, heir. I had stepped fully into my role as CEO of Wilson Enterprises, merging my marketing agency into the larger corporate structure, and bringing my unique perspective to the family business. The best protection isn't secrecy, but transparency, I explained to the board during my first official meeting as chairwoman. 3 generations of Wilson women have built this company through strategic vision and ethical leadership. It's time we claimed that legacy openly. The press had briefly taken interest in the story. Wealthy heiress targeted by serial fraudster makes dramatic recovery. But the Wilson privacy protocols had managed the narrative effectively, focusing attention on Hank's pattern of victimization, rather than my family's wealth or business operations. Rebecca and Melanie had both received full restitution of their stolen funds, along with the other identified victims. More significantly, they had formed an informal support network, sharing resources and information to help other women recognize and avoid similar schemes. The foundation I established to support their work represented one of my proudest achievements, transforming personal betrayal into community protection. Agnes had become a regular visitor at the lake house, her initial awe at its grandeur giving way to comfortable familiarity. Her practical wisdom and genuine affection for Freya provided a grounding influence I deeply valued. "You never needed my help at all, did you?" she had asked one evening, watching me manage conference calls while simultaneously handling Freya's feeding schedule. "I needed exactly what you gave me," I had replied truthfully. "Not financial support or practical assistance, but authentic friendship during a crucial transition." As the sun began to set over the lake, casting long golden reflections across the water, I lifted Freya into my arms and pointed toward the horizon. "Your great-grandmother built our first office building on land not far from here," I told her, knowing she couldn't understand the words, but finding comfort in sharing the legacy nonetheless. "She taught your grandmother, who taught me, and someday I'll teach you." Wilson women face challenges head-on, with strategic minds and unwavering resolve. Freya gurgled in response, her tiny hand gripping my finger with surprising strength. In that grip, I felt the continuation of a lineage defined not by victimhood, but by resilience, not by what was taken, but by what was built in response. This best revenge, my grandmother had often said, is not merely surviving, but thriving in ways your adversary never imagined possible. Looking at my daughter, heir to both a financial fortune and a philosophical one, I knew that Hank's greatest miscalculation had not been choosing a wealthy target, but choosing a Wilson woman. In attempting to leave me with nothing, he had inadvertently pushed me toward everything I was meant to become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.